Chapter 4. Chapter 4 isn't terribly long or terribly difficult, but communication and documentation is important. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that today. First, what is communication?
Transmission of information.
Okay, so part of communication is the transmission of information. What is that information?
Either nonverbal or verbal.
It can be nonverbal or verbal. Is giving someone information, is that all communication is?
No, there's a sender and a receiver.
There's a sender and a receiver.
Feedback.
Feedback. Okay, so we have this loop. We have this thing called the Shannon-Weaver model. And the Shannon-Weaver communication model is explained to us in essentially 5 steps. Okay? In the first step, the sender creates a thought. We all love my little stick figures, so we're going to have some of them over here. And in the first step, he's got this thought created. We're going to call this guy our sender. And this is our creation of our thought. It's all dots, okay? Because it's not out there yet. It's still something that's kind of a concept, and it's stuck in our head as the sender. The second step is that he makes it a message. So if he chooses to make it a message, he says, "Hey, how are you?" So now, instead of it just being a thought, some random concept, it's out there. And he's saying whatever it is that his thought was. Okay? Once he's encoded it into a message and then he puts it out there, "Hi!" That's him putting it out there. That's him sending that message to the receiver. So in our little guy here, we went from thought to message to sending that message. So instead of it being an abstract concept now it's something that's out in the world for other people to hear and understand. Then the receiver receives the message. In our little stick figure scenario over here, we're going to say that our receiver is a pretty blonde girl, or a pretty redhead. Let's call her a redhead because this marker's orange. Okay? And she's listening to the receiver say, "Hey." Now, at this point, she has to decode the message. Oops, that's the wrong marker. Decoding process, she will become the sender. Okay, so she's decoded the message, and depending on her past experiences, her experiences with this guy currently, whatever, that's going to influence how she decodes that message. Whether she's cranky like this, or she's happy like this, or she's sad. Her experiences in the past are going to help her to determine how she decodes this message that she got from the receiver. Does that make sense? Okay, what are some of the things that can influence her decoding or her reception of that message?
If she hears it, like hears it properly.
Okay, if she hears it correctly. What else?
Does she speak the same language?
Okay.
I would have said, does she understand it, but there's other things that involve that too, because depending on who she is and her experiences, there are various things where one person says a thing and it means something completely different to somebody else in concept.
What else?
The nonverbal communication, like.
Okay, the nonverbal communication that goes along with it. That's a big deal.
I mean, if he yells it, I mean, it seems angry, or if he's flirting and just kind of like, hey.
Yeah.
So.
Do you think that age might have something to do with it?
Yeah.
If he's 7 years old and she's 27, is she going to receive that message differently than if he's 30 and she's 27?
Oh, yeah.
What else?
Tone of voice.
Okay, tone, pace, volume. How does that affect how a person receives a message?
A lot.
A lot. How?
Oh, I mean, like I said, same thing. I mean, if you scream something at somebody, or you just like say something to somebody, then they'll take it differently. Or if you're say it really fast or slow, or it may convey an emergency or not. So.
Yeah. So tone, pace, and volume are all important. What else do we have to worry about?
Touching on what he said, it also has to involve the emotion that's involved. Because again, you've got the anger, or you've got the attitude that goes with it. Right. Perception.
Okay. What are each of these as a group? What are these called?
Noise.
They're called noise or
Interference.
filter.
Filter.
Okay. A filter is something that prevents our receiver from receiving the message that the sender intended to send. Okay. Why is it important to understand filters?
You have to understand how to communicate something with somebody to actually get the point across that you want to get across.
Yeah, you need to understand how to communicate with someone so that you can get the point across that you want to get across. Now, when we talk here in class, and we talk about things that you guys already have experience with, everything I say, even subconsciously, everything I say, you are comparing to what you've already learned. So, I may teach you something that's different than what you already know. Right?
Mm-hmm.
When you receive that message, you're filtering it through what you already know or what you've already learned. So you may not get the same message that I sent because you're not receiving it without running it through that filter. The same thing happens when you are talking to me about the things that you already know. You may mean one thing, and because I have training that's different than yours and experiences that are different than yours, I may understand something else. Communication and the ability to communicate appropriately are major life skills. They're major, I don't want to say majorly necessary life skills. In the field of EMS, they're critically important. Can you give me some examples of when the inability to communicate appropriately might cause a problem?
If you're passing care of a patient and you don't convey, I mean, the issues involved with the patient or certain things, it could cause problems there. Or if you're just explaining to the patient the care you're giving and you explain it in like a hasty, like panicky way, they may think the situation is more serious than it is.
Okay, other examples?
If you're trying to build or earn the trust or build a rapport with the patient, and what you say turns them against you.
Is the trust and the rapport with the patient, is that the only thing you need to worry about? What about the trust and rapport with your coworkers?
Or I mean, if you're in court and you're testifying and you don't seem like you know what you're doing, they're gonna assume you don't, even if you're super intelligent.
Yeah. So it can cause a problem in testimony. What about in your written report?
You have to be clear and accurate.
You have to be clear and accurate, concise,
Legal document.
right? So the inability to communicate in your PCR can cause a problem. Can cause a problem with you when you're transferring your patient care, when you're communicating to the insurance company what was wrong, when you're communicating to your medical director why you did the things you did. So learning how to communicate appropriately are super, super important. PCR's patient care report. All right. What is ethnocentrism? What's the difference between ethnocentrism and cultural imposition?
Ethnocentrism is believing that your culture is basically the center of the universe. I mean, it's the only one that matters, and it's basically right.
Ethnocentrism is basically believing that your culture is the center, right? Okay. So it is considering that your cultural values are more important than other people's cultural values. What is an example of an ethnocentric behavior that in America we use fairly regularly?
Everybody understands English?
Everybody understands English? Okay, that's a good one. What about eye contact?
It's rude if you don't have eye contact.
Yeah. In America, we consider it a problem, or we think people are not telling us the truth, or they're hiding something from us if they can't meet our eyes. There are a lot of cultures where eye contact is disrespectful. But if that culture comes into contact with us in America, we can't always understand it. So we have to be aware that those cultures out there, that they exist out there. Oh my gosh, go bug one of the students. All right, what's the difference between verbal and nonverbal communication?
Spoken and not spoken.
Does verbal communication have to be spoken?
Yes.
Yes, do you think? What are other forms of communication that are considered verbal but don't actually come from you speaking?
Hand gestures.
Hand gestures? Particularly if it's American Sign Language? What about the written word? Is that considered verbal or nonverbal?
I would say nonverbal, but I'm obviously wrong.
The written word is considered verbal. Why is it verbal?
Is it like direct words? I mean, basically like it's words as opposed to...
It uses language.
It uses language. Yeah. That's going to be your key here, is it uses language. Okay. Nonverbal nonverbal communication is body language, facial expressions, eye contact. There's a difference between me saying, Corey, you're a little bit late today. Can you please make sure not to do that again? I know you weren't late. I'm just giving you an example. And me saying, Corey, you were a little bit late today. Please make sure you don't do that again. Did I say the same thing? Is it two different meanings? Maybe not two different meanings, but one of them was like a tentative, you were late. Please forgive me for intruding on your space, but please don't be late again. And the other one was like, I'm pissed off. I'm angry, and you need to not make that mistake again. Even though I use the same words, the difference in my body language and how I handled myself made a difference in the way you received the message. Did you get the message both ways? Which one are you more likely to listen to?
The second one.
The second one. Why?
There seems like there may be a consequence if I don't.
There may be a consequence if you don't. Good, I'll remember that. If I have anything to say to you, I'll make sure that it's followed up with a consequence. One of the things that it's important to know about body language is that it can cue you in when you're in a potentially hostile situation. What are some of the things that we look for to cue us in to hostility?
Posture.
Posture, good. What kind of posture makes you think this is a hostile person?
Clenched fists.
Clenched fists? What else?
Shoulders back, like chest out.
Like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, puffed up, yeah.
Puffed up, okay, big.
Yeah.
Using those
Yeah,
lats that you've got there, right?
Any show that would be taken as aggression.
Okay, leaning forward a little bit, probably. Maybe my head pushed forward a little bit, trying to get into your space. Does all of that indicate to you that I might be hostile? A person's body language is super, super important when you're addressing hostility. And why do we need to worry about a person who's hostile?
They could threaten you or the safety of others.
Because they could be
themselves.
threatening you or the safety of others. And what is our most important consideration?
Myself.
Safety of us.
Yeah, rescuer safety first, right? What are some of the ways that you can deal with a person who is being hostile or being potentially hostile?
Call the police.
What is it?
Call the police.
Okay.
Well,
We can call the police.
Law enforcement.
if you can determine what is causing the hostility, maybe if you can separate them from that. In other words, if you've got, husband and wife having an argument, maybe get them in different places and maybe the hostility will subside.
Okay.
Is
Or
this
talk to
C
your patient.
with?
With.
Okay.
Yeah, and then S is without.
Okay.
Okay. So we could call the Leos. We can separate the people if possible. But really, separation of the people, that's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to provide patient care after we make sure that we are safe. Right? So if we can separate them without causing an escalation of the issue, we can try that. If we start to see that escalation, the Leos aren't there, what are we going to do to help de-escalate the situation?
Back out, leave.
Okay, we could leave. When we met last Thursday, we talked about exit strategies, right? What was one of the things that we pointed out when we were talking about exit strategies?
Always see it.
Yeah, you always need to know your way out. So we're going to assess the scene to make sure it's safe. And we're going to make sure that we can find our way to the exit if it's necessary. How do you deal with a person, if you guys are walking down the street and somebody bumps into you, and then they start yelling at you, or you bump into them, and the person starts yelling at you, if you don't want to get in a fight with them because they're 6'5" and 400 pounds and they just stomp you like this, what do?
Passive.
Apologize.
You become passive. You're going to apologize. You're going to become passive. Okay. So we are not going to adopt an aggressive stance. We're going to make sure that we don't return their aggression with aggression, because we're trying not to escalate the situation. We are going to make good eye contact. Without seeming to stare. I don't know about you, but when I'm angry about something and somebody stares at me, it just makes me even angrier. Just give me the space that I need to be angry and leave me alone. That's how I feel about that. We're going to speak calmly. This goes along with not getting aggressive. We're going to speak calmly and confidently. Because we don't want to seem like we're becoming aggressive. And we don't want to threaten our patient. We don't want to threaten the patient, we don't want to threaten the bystander, whoever it is that's becoming aggressive. What do you think is going to happen if we threaten them?
They're going to respond to it.
They're going to return in kind, right? They don't appreciate it. They're already getting aggressive. They're already hostile, so they're just going to respond to you in the same way. You want to get aggressive with me? I'm going to get aggressive with you. And we don't need that. We don't need to deal with that. Okay. When we talk about verbal communication and we're dealing with language, we ask two types of questions. What are those two types of questions?
Open-ended and closed-ended.
Open-ended and closed-ended. What's an example of an open-ended question?
Tell me how you feel. How do you feel?
There you go. Why is that an open-ended question?
Doesn't have
What
a yes.
makes it open-ended versus closed-ended?
Doesn't have a yes or no answer.
It doesn't have a yes or no answer. What kind of information are we going to get from this?
Certainly more than a yes or no answer.
We could get more than a yes or no answer. Does it depend on how your patient answers that question? I feel kind of blah, my toe hurts, my fingers are kind of sticky, I ate some grapes for lunch. Does that help you? Not really.
Not direct enough.
No. So if we get this, if we ask this how do you feel question and your patient answers with the response that I just gave you, what are you going to do?
Ask a more direct question.
Ask a more direct question. What's another open-ended question that's more direct?
Describe your pain, or can you describe your pain?
What pain? I didn't say
Or
that
can
anything
you-
hurt.
Can you
Why
describe
did you
what's
call
wrong?
us here today?
Why did you call us here today? I didn't. My daughter did.
Why did you?
Hey, why did she? Okay. That's an important question to know. Would you agree? Yeah, that kind of leads you to your mechanism of injury or your nature of illness, whatever the reason is for your call that day. Now, what is a closed-ended question?
Are you in pain?
Are you in pain? Do closed-ended questions serve a purpose?
Yes.
Yeah. What purpose do they serve?
Gives you a direct answer.
To give you a direct answer. Are you in pain? Yes. What are you going to follow up with?
Where do you hurt?
Where do you hurt? In my chest. Is that still a closed-ended question?
No?
There's one specific answer, right?
It's closed-ended, but there's more to it. There's
Yeah.
there's a lead-in.
In my chest. Okay, can you describe that pain to me? So there's kind of a technique to using both closed and open-ended questions to get the information that you need from your patient, right? Both of them are valuable when you're interviewing your patient or asking about patient history or trying to figure out why you're there or how to help the patient. We're kind of investigating at this point, right? When we go through our patient assessment and we're talking about our sample history and our OPQRST, some of those are open-ended questions and some of them are closed-ended questions. Some of our closed-ended questions lead us to open-ended questions that we need to know about. There's a technique to this, and the more you do it, the better you'll get. In verbal communication, there are several different types of tools or ways to encourage your patient to give you more information. The first one of those is facilitation. What is facilitation?
Encouraging people to speak more, basically.
Okay, encouraging your patient to talk more. Can you give me an example of that?
Can you tell me more about that?
That's a good example. All right, what's another one?
Silence.
Silence. Silence is fairly self-explanatory, but it's used to give the patient time to think about their response. Okay. Silence is used to give the patient time to think about or formulate their response. In our Shannon-Weaver communication model, when our receiver received the message, if the sender was then quiet while the receiver was receiving and decoding the message, and then the sender remained silent and allowed the receiver time to decode the message and create their own message, that would be the silence that this is talked about, that we talk about here. What is reflection?
Restating to confirm understanding.
Okay, restating what they said to confirm understanding. Can you give me an example of that?
Person says the pain is radiating into my shoulder, so it's radiating into this shoulder.
Good. So it's basically like a mirror, right?
So what you were saying is,
It's going into, yes, I just said it's going into my shoulder. Can you imagine that loop? Yes, it's going into my shoulder. So you said it's going into your shoulder? Yes, it's going into my shoulder.
open-ended question, or a closed-ended question, which one? Left or right?
How about empathy?
understanding your patient's feelings.
Okay. How about clarification?
Asking them to clarify what they mean. If you're not sure what they say, just make them state it in a different way, basically.
What?
Restate.
What about confrontation?
Making them become aware of something they're denying, maybe.
Okay.
If they don't accept that they need to be transported for a certain reason, then just truly like be blunt with it and say, this is a life-threatening issue.
Why do you think it's labeled confrontation?
Because they're not believing something and you're confronting them about it.
Because you're confronting a patient about their beliefs, right? I don't necessarily think that confrontation is the best word for this, because to me, confrontation leads us back to that hostile patient who we are trying everything we can to avoid a confrontation with him. When it's used as a communication technique, though, I can see how this word might work. But we have to remember to separate confrontation with confrontation. Man, too many R's. I did that with cost over T-roll the other day, too. Anyway, confrontation with our hostile patient. And